Welcome back, everybody, to another amazing edition of the USFL Podcast. I'm the ref representing Pro Football Newsroom, the number one source in alternative football news. As you can see, I'm riding solo for the return, but don't worry, Zach's in this episode as well. But we got a lot to talk about this week. Clearly, the NFL season is upon us. We saw 50-plus members of the USFL roster move on to the NFL. We're going to catch up on who made the cut, who's moving to the practice squads. We have one major departure in the USFL with Edward Hartman. We're going to touch on that. And I mentioned Zach's in this episode. He's interviewing the Houston Gamblers Director of Player Personnel, Robert Morris, so you're going to want to stick around for that. We got the question of the week. We got the speculation zone. We're talking free agents. But before we get to that, cue the new intro.
1, 2, 3.
Well, I hope you guys like that. We've been putting a lot of work into the return of the USFL podcast. We're still in season 1 of the show. The league is working towards season 2. Season 2 of the show is going to be around the corner. Before you know it, when we kick off this new year. But you know what? We're already getting things shined up, getting things pretty, making things as good as we can, getting ready for the second year of spring football we've seen in a long time. So as I mentioned before that new intro, we had a lot of guys heading to the USFL. At the end of the day, there's the one man that made the cut, Cavante Turpin, USFL MVP. And looking at what he's done in the preseason, we saw a couple weeks ago, he had a return touchdown. He had a punt return touchdown. The dude's going all out with the Cowboys. He already secured that 3-year deal, but now he made that final roster. But what does that mean about all of these other guys that maybe moved on to the NFL but didn't make that final roster? Well, the great news is we're seeing a lot of these guys get picked up on the practice squads for these various teams. Now, when we look at the numbers, as of right now, as of the time of recording, I believe we're at about 14 or 15 guys that have solidified a spot on an NFL practice squad, which I will remind you pays pretty good money, right? So I'm going to guarantee you none of those guys are angry about that situation. But one thing that we're already seeing is names of guys that played in season 1 in the USFL. They're signing up for season 2. We saw Jamar Smith. He won the championship. That QB, he made it happen. He's already mentioned that he's returning. Now, where did we hear this? He's on Twitch, man. You got to go follow these dudes on social media. It's one after another. We just heard that a majority of the Stallion squad that's available is coming back. One of those names, Bo Scarborough, right? So, as we look at these teams, the one thing that we looked at in season 1 was, it's going to take them about 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks to kind of gel, come together, figure out their rhythm with their teammates. Well, if you have a lot of these teams coming back, a lot of these players coming back to their original teams, some of that gelling factor isn't such of a big deal, right? Because they already played that first season. And we don't even really know what we're looking forward to in season 2. Right now, we're seeing free agency signings. We haven't gotten to the draft. There's not many details on it. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But OTAs, things like practices. The Generals, it feels like they're picking up guys every week, multiple guys. So the opportunities, it shows that these guys can move on into the NFL. Season 1 proved that. We're seeing one guy get a multi-year deal, multiple players get onto the practice squad. The USFL proved that spring football works. Something we already knew. I mean, clearly, we're here hosting this podcast. You're here listening to it because you're a fan of spring football. I'm a fan of spring football, and I think we're all fans of the USFL. I mean, season 2 is not really gearing up yet, but if I were to guess, maybe I'll save that one for the speculation zone. We're going to move topics here. I mean, one of the major names going into the first season of the USFL, Edward Hartman. I mean, he was a major executive at Fox Sports. He came in to kind of run the show for the USFL. Well, we hate to say it. It looks like he's moving on. He's departing for Point Bet, which is a gambling organization, as Global Chief Strategy Officer. He ran business operations for the USFL. He was a senior vice president at Fox Sports. And now he's moving on to kind of a new venture, right? I don't know if we would have saw him in season 2. The way I look at it is he was brought in. He was a trusted person at Fox, and they said, you know what? We need to make sure this league gets off the ground. Let's put it under his purview. Well, I mean, what does it really all mean? Clearly, they have a replacement already. Fox VP of Commercial Operations, Dan Carey, will be replacing Hartman over there. Hartman, my apologies. The league, I think, will survive. It's a tough hit because, I mean, Hartman, he was fun to follow on social media. I mean, he always engaged with our accounts, so, I mean, you got to love him there. But, I mean, this is par for the course. It was kind of expected. We've never made it to a season 2. We never really saw, okay, where are they going to be? The additions, where the subtraction's going to be? The good news is we're only looking at 1 here. From what we understand, the league's going to continue to grow, right? We're probably going to see some more additions. We talked about the new hubs in the past. Maybe hubs. We don't know yet. Sounds like they were angling between 2 and 4. But either way, you know what? It's sad to see Edward Hartman leave. It's a shame we didn't get to meet him ever in person. Had a chat online every so often, but everyone, tip your hat to Edward Hartman. Hope everything works out in your new venture. And hey, if you ever end up back at Fox Sports, you know the USFL will take you. Now, we're going to switch over to something different here, right? We have an interview on the show. I had mentioned Zach Kyleman is making an appearance here. And I mean, is he making an appearance? He's talking to the Houston Gamblers Director of Player Personnel, Robert Morris. So let's head over there right now. I mean, what are we waiting for?
Welcoming everybody into the latest edition of the USFL Podcast Interview Series. Zach Kyleman here sitting in the host chair for this one. As always, today I have the pleasure to be joined by the Director of Player Personnel for the Houston Gamblers, Robert Morris. Robert Morris has been across the board at multiple different levels of the sport, and now he sits here with Houston going into their second season. Coach Mo, as they go by for yourself. How are you doing? How has the process been? Now you have an off season for a spring league. You've been in 3 of these type of leagues, so this is why I kind of want to lead off with that.
Right. Well, the first 2 we never made it to the end of the season, so we don't know what the off season was like. In the Alliance, we got 8 games in, and then had to pull the plug. And then in the XFL, COVID hit, and so we never had an off season. So when Daryl, who I worked with, Daryl Johnston, both at San Antonio and Dallas, when we hit the last game and made it to the end, we said, well, what do we do now? Because nobody had ever been there before. And so, the people in the league office were meeting that last week that we were in Birmingham and setting up plans for, what our schedule was going to be from here until next March. And so we got our marching orders and we went to work. So that's kind of what we did, but we're all kind of feeling our way through, what's the best approach, what's the best way to do it, how to handle our personnel the best, and how to scout and be efficient with our time. So,
right. And I guess that kind of, you're feeling this out yourself for this kind of going in this second season. What, any immediate things sticking out for your process so far compared to, say, preparing an entire roster, or at least helping prepare an entire roster for last year? Because, I mean, with this setup, you have guys that, you can have optional second years come back. Some are going to the NFL. Others may not make the rosters. Some you hope make the rosters. When I feel that for a personnel department might be a little bit of juggling, or kind of like a wait and see game for certain phases of maybe a different season, say NFL or your off season.
Right. I wait and see. I don't know if that's the right word. You just need to kind of play it by ear and go go where the players are really. And the first phase, after taking basically the summer off, we finished in July or June, middle of June, and then the playoffs were the 4th of July. So basically the month of July to the end of August, or to the 1st of August, then you had about a month there where there was no football going on. And then the NFL camp started. And so that was our first order of business, was to take the 32 NFL teams, divide them up amongst the 8 USFL teams. And then we all basically went out and scouted for the league. We each took those 4 teams and write up reports on the guys that are on the cut line, going to get cut, possibly get cut, not make practice squad. You kind of watch the bottom 30 and then figure it out from there. And then we have a scouting base, which we'll all put that information in. So the neat thing about what we're doing in the USFL, to a certain degree, we're all sharing information. We did it last year before the draft, going through 2,800 names,
Right.
Getting ready for the draft a year ago, all doing our own reports and putting them into a master system. And then the last 10 days or so breaking off. And now I was a Houston Gambler, and Steve was a Michigan Panther, and Zach was a Birmingham Stallion. And so then we all did our own thing with our head coach and figured out the order we wanted to draft guys. But up until that time, we were all scouting for the league and getting as many players as we could into the database. And the same is true now. The information that I have from my 4 teams will go into the database, just like the other guys will put their names in. And then we'll go from there in a process of selecting players. And we won't have a draft. It's just a matter. These guys are basically all free agents for our league. And so we'll select the ones we feel fit our league and go from there if we can get them interested in joining up with the USFL.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, that has got to be, kind of the part that if I was in this position, I would be wanting to, I think, get them, at least have the most challenge for is, you go to camps like you've been in the Raiders camp. You were over in Arizona. I know you talked about meeting up with Isaiah Zuber and Victor Bolden at times at those. And, I think evaluating just kind of that, like you're saying, that other portion of the roster that, maybe these are guys that I can get as a diamond in the rough, someone that I can bring in, make it where they can have it propel themselves.
Right.
That part to me is, I think, what is the best. It's a challenge, I would say, but I think that's something that is a very rewarding piece to what this league is about.
Right. Well, I spent 16 years in the NFL as a scout. And so, I've been through this process on the NFL side. And I know I realized very quickly when you get into an NFL camp, said, man, this is what the real, the top elite players look like.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit bigger than the USFL guys, a little bit faster, not all of them, but a little bit. And then there are those guys at the bottom of the roster that are really equal to the players that are playing in the USFL, to be honest. I mean, Victor Bolden looked like he belonged. Obviously Turpin, what he's doing with Dallas, he belongs. I know if you read my report on Turpin, when I saw Dallas, I said the one thing he has and no other receiver in Dallas has is speed.
Yeah.
And that's true. And so all of our guys have made a good representation of what football in the USFL is about. The guys in our league are lacking something. That's why they aren't in the NFL. If Micah would have been 2 inches taller or 10 pounds heavier, it wouldn't have taken him 3 years to get into the NFL, but it did. But now that he got a chance to play, he showed the NFL what he's all about. I mean, the guy is a great guy. He's smart, can play all 3 positions, and he's gotten into a camp now to show what he can do. And that's true with all 50 guys. They all have something. That's why we got him in our league. And there's 6 former NFL scouts doing the personnel for our league. We all saw something in them, and this is a job of a scout, is not, don't tell me what they can't do, tell me what they can do. And it's up to the coaching that staff then to use those traits and put them on the field and make them successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so now the NFL watches our film and they see those guys that at one point for the last 2 or 3 years, they have passed on because they lacked something. They weren't as good as the players that they had on their roster. And I can see that because there are a lot of really good football players, and some guys are missed. I missed my share when I was an NFL scout too. But now they get a chance, and it's in that late window right between May and June, right before they're going to camp. So, I mean, now the NFL has a recent film. They can get a very recent evaluation from guys that have been in the NFL, and they know they're in shape. And those guys came in like gangbusters. I know Micah got signed the day before a game and went in and played, and I wasn't surprised because, I know how smart he is and what he could do. And Odom, I think, was the same way. I think he was there 2 days before he played in Cleveland and then had a sack. So, there are enough good football players out there. And our job is just find what they can do, just like the guys that are getting cut now. I understand why they're getting cut, and yet there are a lot of good traits that we can use in our league to help develop them to a certain degree where they hopefully will get a second look by an NFL team. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them just need to play. The NFL has this international program where they have like one international player on each roster. God, if we could find a way to get those guys, because all they're going to do is be on the practice squad. If we could find a way to get those guys in our league for 10 games and let them play, I mean, there's some tremendous looking athletes, and all they lack is experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have traits. They're big, they're tall, they're strong, they're fast, you name it, whatever position they are. And you just love to give them a chance to play 10 games and see what they could develop into. And that would be, I think, something neat that we could do for those guys and for the NFL. Right.
And I think this conversation's been going on for a little bit now, and it's great. It's gained some steam. I think, we talk about, the AAF's not around anymore, XFL 2.0, of course, for its circumstances, of course, 3.0 is coming back. But, the understanding I get when I talk with folks, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that, the NFL doesn't, without a feeder system like the NFL doesn't have, that talent kind of at least trying to I guess, maybe not retrain, but say fine tune it, doesn't really exist as much. So having a league like this, for sake of scouting, I think maybe if you have someone, say you put a note to the side and you want to come back to them and you see them go to the USFL, I feel like the USFL lets you kind of go, okay, these traits that I wanted to see improvement on, maybe I can go back, maybe think about signing him on. Maybe he is back. His level is increased thanks to being in a different league.
Yeah, I mean, they're all different examples. Take Carlo Kemp, for example. He played defensive tackle at Michigan. I know Carlo because he's a grandson of my high school coach. But, Carlo was at Michigan as a defensive lineman, 280 pounds, was in Green Bay's camp and Denver's camp a year ago, mm-hmm. and didn't make it, got cut. And so he decided, along with the football people in his family, that the best thing for him to do was to cut weight, get down to 255, go back to being a defensive end, which he wasn't in high school and what he went to Michigan as, mm-hmm. and remake himself. And he did. So he was a stand-up defensive end in the Maulers defense, played great, I think he had 4.5 sacks, 5 sacks, something like that. And now he got signed by the Chargers. And just watching him play, he knocked down a pass the other day, and he's doing a great job. And he's playing the same position he was playing for the Maulers. Without the USFL, he doesn't get that chance. All he gets is a chance to, his agent can call the NFL team and says, okay, I've got this guy. He was 280 pounds. He's cut to 250. I've got a workout tape for you. Sign him. That's not going to work. But, hey, I've got this guy. He was 280 pounds. He cut down to 250, and you should watch him play in the USFL. All I'd say, watch his tape. And sure enough, Carlo was productive. He showed that he could play. He's got all the intangibles that you would like. And so now he played, and now he's with the Chargers doing a great job. And I'm happy for him. Mm-hmm. So that's what a spring league can do. It can allow a guy to change positions also.
That is a good point. We've seen in other cases too. It's funny, the Chargers, Donald Parham is someone who I think had a little bit of evaluation there in terms of kind of showing that getting another league option, going to his, like you on Dallas when you were at the. Yeah,
interesting. Donald was on our team in Dallas, and Darryl was at Philadelphia that year and saw him. Here's this tall drink of water from small school Stetson. And didn't really get a chance in Philadelphia's camp. He was just a tall guy, really good athlete. And Daryl saw that in him. And so we signed him or drafted him and brought him to our camp. And, we're running the run and shoot, and we just see, man, here's this split out tight end that can run these seam routes and do all these things. And yeah, he had some things to learn football wise, just, as far as that's concerned, and how to fit, where routes go. And how Mummy, after about a week, wanted to get rid of him, say, hey, he's never going to learn the offense. He's never going to fit in. He's just not a natural. And then he catches a 40-yard seam route for a touchdown in practice, and Hal's, I think I can use that guy. And then, once he got into the year, then I think he had 6 touchdowns, had a really good game against the LA Wildcats and against Seattle. He actually caught that double pass for a long touchdown in that Seattle game. And now he's become a threat on the goal line for the LA Chargers. And so, again, there's another guy. He just needed to play. He needed a place to play because he was from a smaller school and just didn't have the experience that the other guys in the camp had. And I see that as I go around to the NFL camps too. There are just certain guys that don't have the experience that some of the guys they're competing against are kind of left on the end of the bench. They don't get a lot of time in the games. But as you watch them move around practice, they do have some traits that if you got your hands on them, maybe you could help develop them and give them a shot maybe a year or two down the road.
Mm-hmm. Now, talking in the sense of just for this year and say the USFL, Gamblers, as we were talking this year, a team that felt like it was right on the cusp of so many wins. We were getting to 5 straight, last second or one possession losses at one point. But ended on a strong note. Some of those players on that Gamblers unit now, like Chris Odom and like Mike Abernathy, they're making impacts on rosters right now, at least getting their chances to play. For the Gamblers this year, and I guess with the process for between, say, you and Kevin Sumlin, how are those conversations? When you and him talk, how do you discuss on, okay, what am I looking for? What do you want to look for? What page do we want to be on when I'm, say, looking around and going to camps, going out to other events and kind of scouting talent that maybe I can bring back to Houston?
Right. Kevin and I talk probably about once a week. Matter of fact, he just called me, about a half hour ago to talk about some things. For the most part, we would like to bring back everybody that was on our roster. We had a really good group of guys. If we didn't have a good group of guys, we would have lost them about midseason. When you lose 3 games on the last play and another game with 9 seconds left, and the guys stay together and kept working, there really isn't anybody on the roster that we want to get rid of just because we want to get rid of that guy. Talent-wise, yeah, we need to improve at some positions, and we'll do that. But as far as saying we don't want this guy to come back or we don't want these 10 guys to come back, that's really not the way it is. The guys that want to come back, we're going to be encouraged to come back. I'm recruiting those guys as hard as I'm recruiting or looking at the guys in the NFL camps because they know what the USFL is about. We know what they can do. They're good players, and that would be our base to start with. Now, adding players to that and adding competition, which we didn't have last year. You drafted 45 guys. Those are the 45 guys you went to camp with, and you didn't make any changes unless they were hurt because you only had 3 moves to make. And then at the end, we got to add, 5 roster spots, which helped us. Mm-hmm. But no, we would like all of them back, and we would like to then add a group of players that will push those players to make us better, and so the overall roster gets better. So that's kind of where we're at. Kevin, I know what he wants offensively now, probably a little bit better than I did a year ago, and I know what we want defensively. And so it's just a matter of trying to find enough guys that are in the pocket of players. It's not like you can rank them like this. You got, okay, here's a pool of 10 players. We'll take one of those 10, or here's a pool of 5 receivers. We'll take any one of those 5 that wants to come. Because the guys at this level are so close. It's just finding something that they can do that we can use on our offense or defense and giving them a shot. And then they see the same vision we see, because there's going to be some players that are cut that aren't going to have that vision. We went through this, in the XFL and the Alliance, that just because you offer it to them doesn't mean they're going to take it. They all think that they're one call away from getting called up to the NFL again because their agent has told them, well, if I've heard if one guy gets hurt, you're the next call. or they're constantly having workouts on Tuesdays, which happens. And, so there are going to be guys that are going to put off that decision and aren't going to say right away, I want to go to the USFL. You'll find some that will. And if they're the right fit for us, then we'll take them. But just like with the 50 guys that signed, if a player that's come from an NFL team, say here in the next couple of weeks, and we call him and say, we would like you to be a part of our roster, he can sign and be a part of our roster. And 4 weeks down the road, the NFL comes calling, just like our guys did. They void their contract, they sign an NFL contract, and they're on. Once that's over with, then they become, a Houston Gambler again once that NFL experience, if it does ends, and then we're right back where we were. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. We'd love to get as many players as we can that have the ability to play in the NFL. Obviously, they can't all do that, and there's a place in our league for those guys too. There's a place for those guys that just overall lack the traits to play in the NFL, but are good football players. Mm-hmm. Those guys can compete in the USFL and be successful. There are a bunch of them this year. There are a bunch of guys who are on our all-league team that aren't in the NFL right now. A lot because they just don't have the traits to play, but they have the heart to play. They have the production. They have the instincts. But you can't all play in the NFL. It's just not right. There's not enough room for everybody to play. And that's why spring football is so good, because there are enough good football players to play some really good football.
Yeah, we saw plenty of it, of course, last season, and that's a great point. I mean, the NFL, like you're talking, there's only so many roster spots that you can have. Well, it's not like we're going to be talking expansion anytime soon, but even with that, that's still a minuscule amount added more. And you consider the scope of 53-man rosters, and then you have so many more players, like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction when we talk about the talent pool in terms of trying to get to that point. So, having this having this level here with the USFL, I think people just like it because, what, like you're talking, whether it's you enjoy playing the game, whether you're trying to get to your next spot, that's at least available. That was a thing that wasn't there previously. There's other much smaller leagues, but I feel like this is kind of that nice, it's that next big step. It doesn't feel like you're going a massive leap. It's right on the doorstep if you want it to be that way. Or to me, I could see as a career path in that case.
One thing about the USFL is we tried as a league to be a young league. We didn't want a bunch of, and I think in the Alliance we did this, we didn't want a bunch of guys that had already had their time in the NFL and were just trying to keep going. We have some of those guys for sure, but for the most part, I think the average age of our league was 25 and a quarter, or 25.2, something like that. Mm-hmm. And so we've got guys that are just 2 or 3 years out of college, or maybe just a year out of experience in the NFL. And they're going against those same type of guys. So the NFL looks at those guys and said, well, they're competing against guys that are just a step below what's in the NFL, and they can project them to making their roster. I think that's why we got so many of our guys got a look.
Yeah. Definitely. And I also want to ask, do you see that the recency of tape, does that play impact? I'm sorry, I missed that. I was gonna say, does the recency of like the tape that's produced, does that help with kind of evaluation for some NFL squads? Like, say you just played a week before and you can kind of go, all right, I know I'm going to get right off the bat if I get signed on somewhere.
Right. I know in my case, when I'm watching film from 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we were looking at guys that have played in the XFL, and that's the last tape we have. Well, that's 2 years ago. You hope it's the same guy. So yeah, the most recent tape, the better evaluation it is, the better you can put your thumb on it and say, I know who this guy is, as a scout going to your general manager saying, hey, I want this guy because I just saw him do this. I just saw Chris Odom get 11 and a half sacks. He can do it. And he was doing it against tackles that had been in the NFL. So, I think he's a good guy to sign. So yeah, you can have those type of conversations, and as a scout from your end, feel pretty confident that the guy's going to produce what you saw in the USFL.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask about one official signing that did come across the wire here. Joshua Moore from Texas. What can you tell me about Joshua? I see a lot of people that I've talked to are pretty excited for this signing for the Gamblers. kid coming out of Texas. What do you
Yep.
what do you have in terms of evaluation for him?
Well, Joshua is a guy that Kevin and David Beatty both knew from high school because they had recruited him. So they knew the name. They know the Texas staff really well. So they had a good idea, both the Texas staffs that had been there in his time there. So we could get a good evaluation that way. One thing that, as you can see, the guys that have made it from our league to the NFL, what is the one thing they have is speed.
Yeah.
And the more speed you have on the field, there are less people on the other side of the ball that can defend it. And so on offense, that's what you want to try and get. Zubers is a good example. He led the USFL in touchdowns. And the one, and the one reason we liked Isaiah and took him with our first pick was the fact that he could run. And so we're always going to be looking for receivers that can run. And so that's what Joshua does. And he had 2 productive years at Texas, went through a coaching change this last year. So I know he's hungry to show what he can do. And he kind of got lost as a 4th-year junior in transferring and missing a supplemental draft for the NFL. So the USFL now fits in for him a little bit different than it does anybody else, because he's actually now he needs a place to play. Mm-hmm. And the USFL and the Houston Gamblers are going to provide him that opportunity.
Do you forecast seeing more players like Joshua's situation as long as these leagues keep on going years to come? Because I know that a lot of people raised eyebrows because him coming out of Texas a little from what seems a little earlier, he had another year from the looks of it that he could have gone. So do you see this in your eyes maybe potentially snowballing a little more the longer this goes?
I think there will be circumstances like this where it happens and we become another avenue for a player. But I don't think I may be wrong, but I don't think we will be a player in the transfer portal. Maybe for a guy that's a 5th-year guy, if he just wants to come out and start his pro career early, maybe we become an avenue. But I don't think as a league we'll spend a lot of resources there. There's only one of me. I can't do college pro and the portal all at the same time. Even the colleges now have 3 guys to, do the junior college, do the high school, do their own team, and then do the portal. So, it'll be an avenue for some players, but I think it'll have to be a special circumstance like it was with Joshua. He just kind of got it closed out of his 5th year of relationships, previous relationships, being able to move in and give him a place to play.
All right. Well, I think I and many others looking forward to seeing him hit the field here. And honestly, we're excited to see this thing ramp up as we go. Because it is kind of funny. It's only been about a month and a half now, pushing 2 months. But people are getting excited to see the signing waves start to kick in, as well as what else is ahead for the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting next 4 months. You've got the NFL making their cuts, so there are going to be a lot of free agents out there. You've got the XFL having a draft in the middle of the fall, so there are going to be some players that are going to go that way. So we'll be battling for players. Which avenue do they want to take, and so we'll have conversations with those players. And, then at the start of the year, things will really ramp up and we'll get going again, like we did a year ago. So, it's interesting. It's like I said, this is new ground for us, for any spring league to have an off season and what that off season looks like. And so we're making the best decisions we can as we go. And the important thing now is the NFL cuts and who they are, and then making inroads with those guys and sharing our vision of what the USFL can do for them. And hopefully they see the same thing and help make our league stronger a year from now.
Absolutely. Coach Mo, thank you very much for
joining
me. Really, and very insightful conversation. I love stuff like this. Can't wait for season 2 and to see what you guys with Houston do, as well as the league in general. Appreciate your time though. And
Zach, appreciate you too, man. I appreciate all of the positive press you guys give us. And I know sometimes there seems to be a battle between the CFL, the XFL, the USFL, just as long as the players are getting a chance, I know I was at a Houston practice, and there was an there was a USFL ref there, who had been at our games, and so he was actually working his craft during preseason too. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for players that don't make NFL rosters. The USFL is one of those. We feel we have a track record to sell and to show what we can do, and to giving them an opportunity. So my phone number is they know how to get a hold of me, and I'll be getting a hold of them too. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'm going now. It's funny. I'm joking aside. Now, if I had like one of those clickbait hooks, I put my phone number. My phone number is as a quotation mark on the thumbnail here.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Coach Mo. Appreciate the time. Best of luck again. And yep, that'll do it for this edition, folks.
Wearing with pride.
Oh, look at that! See, that's the thing. You gotta come and put on your best gear. Represent what you got.
Yeah, that's right.
Stay tuned, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this latest interview. We'll see you on the next one.
What an interview. I mean, what a way to bring the show back. We're coming in with a new intro, new segments. We got the interview segment here, and what a way to kick things off. You know me, as a Houston Gamblers fan, I was tied into that through in and throughout. We hope you enjoyed. But hey, let us know down in the comments below, who would you like to see us interview here in the future, right? We're always adding to that interview series. We're always adding to the show. As you can see, we're taking a little bit of special care. I mentioned it earlier, polishing things up as much as we can, but we always want as much feedback. You can always contact us at mailbag@USFLcast. Speaking of new segments, we're trying something else out here a little bit. We're going to introduce a new one right here. Question of the week. So this week's question, we posted it over on our social media at USFL Podcast. Which city would benefit the USFL the most as an additional hub? Now, I have my own thoughts on it. I'm sure Zach does as well. But we got some interesting opinions coming through our chats here. I mean, just to name off a few, we had Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Makes sense. We had Detroit, Michigan. I also think that makes sense. Now, we have another one in here. Now, this is from one of our super followers, Dave Smith. I mean, he's been a fan since the beginning. He's helped us out even securing a few of those interviews and maybe a few more here in the coming weeks and months. We'll see. He had mentioned Canton, Ohio. Now, I'm sure you're aware, Canton, Ohio, the Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium, played host to the USFL last year for the playoffs and the championship game. Now, they don't have a team associated with that city, but you know what? It might be crazy enough for it to work, right? I mean, Ohio loves their football. The stadium, I mean, they're doing a lot of construction out there, but when they're done, we're talking state of the art. They're going to have a hotel. It's essentially going to be its own amusement park. So them kind of getting tight with that area could pay some dividends. Now, looking to the rest of the list, I've always thought Detroit would be a huge get for the city and the league, right? There's a lot of people hungry for good football in Detroit. I'm a Lions fan. I know. I grew up every year. This year is the Lions year, says every fan, every Lions fan. This is our year. And like I mentioned, maybe this is our year this year, but I'm going to go and wager that it probably isn't. But maybe the Panthers, they can go from being one of those bottom echelon teams to one of those top echelon teams. And this maybe, especially if they get the hub, we'll see. We don't know really a lot of the factors in there, but I mean, when you look at the main roster for the Panthers, there was a lot of close games in there. Their record doesn't really indicate the quality of team that they really were. And when we look at kind of the point I made earlier about the gelling, the adjusting, if you keep a majority of your roster, a lot of that goes away in the early season. So, I mean, if you take that 3 weeks, add 3 wins to their total, they're getting a little bit more competitive there. And I mean, let's be honest here. They were a pretty solid team, but their record just doesn't indicate that at all. And I mean, they have a good chance of just bringing it out. And regardless if they're a top echelon team or a bottom echelon team, Detroit will show up for their football. We've seen that with the Lions. Where would they play? I mean, Ford Field would be awesome. It's going to be tough to fill, but I mean, you have the dome, so weather's not a factor. And I mean, when you're looking at when the USFL plays, it's still a little bit chilly in the Detroit area going into April, May. It's really about early June where things start picking up. Now, you have these same problems in Philadelphia, but let's be honest here. It's not like out of the norm to play in a dome. It's not crazy to play outside in the cold. We've seen it with Green Bay. We've seen it with Philadelphia. We've seen it with Pittsburgh. We see it in New York or New Jersey, right? So maybe that's something they'll try out here. I don't know. If I were to wager, and we'll move this one into one of everyone's favorite segments, the speculation zone. All right, man. I hope you guys like the effort that we're putting into this because I'm really digging that new speculation zone little intro stinger piece there. But let's get to the fact of the matter here. Where do I think the USFL is going to play their hub, additional hubs, maybe one of their hubs? I'm going to tell you there's two on my list, two that we mentioned in that question of the week. One is Detroit, Michigan. I'm looking at the facts. I mean, everything's kind of lined up for it right there. They won that final game against the Maulers, which secured them the first pick in every round of the upcoming USFL draft. So beyond the players that they're keeping, which is a pretty good crew right there, they're going to have an opportunity to get the top pick in each of the different categories. If assuming that's how it goes again this time around, maybe we will see a more traditional snake draft. Maybe it won't be broken down by the types of players like quarterbacks and linebackers and defense and so on and so forth. But either way, the Panthers are looking strong. Now, I'm not going to say that this was by design. Maybe it was just a blessing in disguise, but I'm sure it did Birmingham, the Stallions, a lot of favors to have that team be as good as they were. I think people would have still showed up for the Stallions, but the fact that they were undefeated a majority of the season definitely bodes well. Now, when you're looking to expand that hub, I think you're going to want one of those teams to do well just to kind of boost your opportunity for people to show up at games. Now, that's where I could see maybe something like Philadelphia, something like New Jersey. I think either of them would be a great pick because we're now looking at those top tier teams, at least in season one. But my speculation zone, I'm going to have to agree. I think Dave Smith is on the right track here. Not based on anything I heard, but Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium is the perfect size and I think a great location for the USFL to land in season 2. How would it work? I don't know. Maybe we'll see half the similar to what we saw in the spring league. The southern teams play in Birmingham, the northern teams play in Canton. Still going to be some travel there, at least you would assume, unless they completely separate the divisions until we get to the off season. But I think Canton's a perfect fit. I think we'll see Canton as that spot. Again, this is purely speculation zone. This is where I'm speculating. I don't think a team needs to be associated with the city. I think it'll help. But looking at the cost-cutting procedures, making sure everything kind of works out, you have a pretty short distance between the two cities, whether it's either by plane ride or a bus if you have to, right? The stadium is a perfect size. It seats around 20,000. I mean, we saw it at the championship game. That was a packed house. You had a couple of tarps in there, maybe during the regular season. Bob's your uncle. You're good to go. They already have a good rapport with the association that runs the stadium, with the Hall of Fame and all of that. And as they build that stadium out, I mean, what a perfect destination as a football fan. I mentioned earlier, they're building a hotel at Tom Benson. And I'll tell you what, as much as I love that Airbnb that was just right around the way, the football house, you know I'm going to be staying at that Hall of Fame hotel. You know it the second it's built, and especially if the USFL lands in Canton in a more permanent position. Now, we don't even know if the league is going to play their championship there again next year. Realistically, from what we understand, a big reason they played the playoffs and the championship there this year was because there was some scheduling conflicts over in Birmingham with the World Games. But you know what? I am a betting man. I would wager that we will see them in Canton one way or another next year, whether it's just the playoffs and the championship, maybe just the championship, or as an additional hub. Now, I want to know your take. I want to know, am I crazy? You can tell me, ref, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. It's never going to happen. Or tell me your thoughts. If the league lands in Canton as a second hub, do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you think there will be good attendance, poor attendance? We want to know. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Hey, shoot, even tag us over on social media at USFL Podcast. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll be honest, we're more likely to answer on Twitter. But you know what? If it floats your boat, ping us anywhere. We'll get to that comment, and maybe we'll add it into the mailbag one of these weeks. So, heck of a speculation zone. We hope you like the intro. We're at our last topic here of the return episode. Free agency is in full effect. I mean, teams continue to add to their rosters week after week. The league is putting out notices on social media, keeping people up to date on all the transactions. Now, we kind of alluded to this earlier. The New Jersey Generals, I mean, Mike Riley must not sleep. He doesn't take a break because they've been stacking them from the beginning. I mean, they were the first team to mention that they had any free agent signings. And it seems like every week they're adding and adding and adding. And just a reminder, now these teams, they can build up to 75-man rosters in this kind of preseason area. It's going to get cut down. Maybe it'll be the same as last year. Maybe we'll see some expansions. We don't know. But, I mean, it feels like once the Generals made that first signing, all of the other coaches became on alert. And they said, well, we better get in on this. Every week, though, we're getting more and more. Now, there's one here that caught my eye. Now, I'm just a fan of kickers. But back in the spring league on the Alphas, we had Nathan Hurley. The dude was a stud. And, I mean, he just got signed to the Pittsburgh Maulers. And they just had Ramiz Ahmed, who was amazing in his own right, broke the record for the longest field goal in the USFL. But Nathan Hurley, I have a feeling he could keep up with Ramiz for the team as well. Now, I'm hoping we're trying to line up an interview with him to get him on the show. If you're listening, sign you up. If you haven't seen any of his highlights, check them out. Here's what we want to know. We've talked about a couple things. There's a boatload of guys that have already mentioned that they're planning on returning to the USFL next year. We're seeing time and time again teams adding to that roster who, either from the season last year, from a different league, do you want to see join the USFL next year? I mean, there's so many to pick one. We mentioned one earlier, Bo Scarborough. Sign him up, bring him on the team, make sure he's back in that league because, one, I mean, for Birmingham itself, he's got the name recognition. He's a local star, and he's a hell of a player. But we want your thoughts as well. So let us know. That's the question of the week. Who would you like to see either return to the USFL or join the USFL in season 2? So, I mean, right now, there's not much known about the draft. All we know is right now, free agent signings are open. So the market is there. But at a certain point, those are going to shut down. And then from what we understand, all of the signings will then be entered into the draft pool for next season. Season 2 is still kind of crazy to even mention a season 2. We've been doing, I've been running Newsroom for almost 5 years, 5 years in December. It's crazy to think about. And we've never made it to a season 2. So, sign us up. I'm glad we're back doing the show. I'll be back next week for sure. Zach will probably be with me as well. Thanks again for joining. But before we leave off, just a couple housekeeping items. If you're not following us on social media, I really don't know what you're doing. If you want the latest news, either follow us at USFL Newsroom or at USFL Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And I mean, we have good stuff going on, whether it's other podcasts, news articles, columns. It's almost daily content, and we're going to keep it going. I mean, we're going to push through to the next season here. So if you're dying for some more content, we got you covered. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, let's be honest here. That's where the party's at. You get to see this beautiful face. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Click the bell. It builds morale. I mean, it's been a while since we've had some USFL action. I know the NFL's right around the corner, but I want to see that good spring football action. I need a little bit of morale. Click that bell. Maybe it's already clicked. Unclick it. That's fine. As long as you click it again, I'm pretty sure that counts towards the morale meter. And hey, by subscribing, you're also entered into our giveaways. We have good times, good guests, and giveaways here on the USFL podcast. But realistically, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for, making us the number one USFL podcast. It makes sense with the name. But until next time, guys, sign you up.